Well, we had a shooting today. Officer involved. What happened?
That is correct. So it was all happened approximately a little bit before 1 p.m. today. There was a license plate reader notification that came from our real-time crime center about a vehicle that had been stolen a couple of days ago. I understand to be a maroon-colored Santa Fe that was stolen on the 10th. The license plate, the persons in the real-time crime center notified All Points Bulletin that this car was in the area of Goodfellow and Lillian. The vehicle stops at Goodfellow and Lillian in a service station. We have a patrol car that had 2 officers in it. The officers approach the vehicle, and in fact, they drive toward the vehicle. One officer exits the vehicle. This officer is the passenger officer. The passenger officer confronts the driver at the gas pump. At some point in time, the door is open, and so the officer is now standing between, very briefly between the door and the suspect himself. Very suddenly, the car accelerates backwards, and the officer is caught in between the door and the actual car itself. And so there's several feet in which the vehicle accelerates backwards and crashes on the other side of the service station, at which time the officer falls to the ground. During that passage between the time that he confronts the suspect and the time that the crash occurs, the officer does discharge his weapon. It strikes the suspect. The suspect has been pronounced deceased at the scene, deceased at the hospital. And the officer has sustained a very significant head injury. And so we're still it's very early on, still trying to figure out exactly how the officer is injured, but the officer's, his injuries are non-life-threatening, but at the same time a significant head injury. So I'll repeat one more time, explain what happened. And so our license plate reader, those notifications come from our real-time crime center. Our real-time personnel in the real-time crime center notified the district officers that a car that had been stolen 2 days ago was in the area of Goodfellow and Lillian. In fact, our officers, a 2-man patrol car, locate that vehicle on a service station lot at Goodfellow and Lillian. The officers drive toward the vehicle. The passenger officer, who is 31 years of age and had been on the department for 2 years, approached the driver. The driver, at some point in time, the driver door opens, and the officer is standing between, very briefly, between the doorway, and the suspect himself. Very suddenly, the car is accelerated backwards. The officer is caught between the door and the car itself, and then the car crashes on the other side. So they're at one set of gas pumps. The vehicle's accelerated in reverse and crashes into the other set of gas pumps. During that time, between the time the officer is initially caught and the time that the crash occurs, the officer discharges his weapon. I'm not sure, at this point, we're not sure how many times the officer discharged the weapon, but the suspect was wounded, and the suspect has since been pronounced deceased. Again, the officer is a 31-year-old officer. He's been on the department for 2 years. The suspect is a black male, apparently in his mid-20s.
Chief, you're not mentioning that the driver had or showed a gun, but he was shot and killed by the police officer. Why would the police officer shoot him in this situation?
Well, that's all a part of the investigation. We'll be determining what happened and when. Like I said, we are still processing the car, so we not know what's in the car. That's still a part of the process. Our evidence technician unit is processing the car as we speak.
What's the name of the gas station?
I'm not sure the name of the gas station. I just know that it is at the corner of Goodfellow and Lillian.
So you don't know if the suspect had a gun in the car?
Yeah, I do not know if the suspect had a gun in the car.
The person who was killed was the passenger or the driver?
It was only one person in the suspect car, and that is the driver.
And are you absolutely certain that the officer fired before the driver went in reverse, and how do you know that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I just know that at some point in time, between the time that the confrontation between the suspect and the officer, there's somewhere in between the time that he's standing between the car and ends up crashing that his weapon was discharged.
2 more questions. Was there any video, body cam video or dash cam video?
There is available video in the vicinity.
Could we have access to that?
At some point, we will release the video.
Thank you, guys.
You know,
And Chief, one more thing. Could the officer have fired at the driver to stop the car from backing up to save his life?
Yeah, that's all to be a part of the investigation. We're unsure right now exactly how the whole thing transpired.
Do you know anything about the young man who died?
I don't know anything about the deceased suspect.
and pardon me if I'm not quite getting it. The gun goes off sometime after the car is going in reverse.
Yeah, it's uncertain right now when the weapon is discharged. We just know that there was a confrontation at the door. We know that the officer is hooked in between. We know that the car is very rapidly accelerating in reverse, and somewhere in that dynamic, the weapon was discharged.
Just thinking of scenarios that maybe he went in reverse after he was shot.
That'll all be a part of the investigation.
How long was the car reported stolen?
Well, it was reported stolen 2 days ago.
Was it a
many shots were
carjacking
fired?
or?
It was not a carjacking; it was a regular theft.
Where was
the
it
car
stolen?
stolen from? We'll give you all that information from
Right.
public information.
Chief, do you know how
Okay.
many shots were fired by the officer?